Right now, someone is pulling your strings, and the terrifying part, you have no idea it's happening. You think your decisions are your own. You believe your opinions were formed independently. But what if I told you that the most effective manipulation leaves no fingerprints? The best manipulation makes you believe it was your idea all along. This isn't paranoia. This is psychology. And today, we're going to expose the invisible threads that control your thoughts, your emotions, and your choices. Hidden control, invisible strings. From the subtle tactics used by people you trust, to the sophisticated techniques employed by systems you depend on. By the end of this video, you'll never see your relationships, your media, or even your own mind the same way again. As the philosopher Noam Chomsky once observed, the smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion. Welcome to the Psyche Project, the invisible cage. Here's the first uncomfortable truth. Manipulation only works when you don't see it. Think about that for a moment. The moment you recognize a manipulation tactic, it loses most of its power. So the most dangerous forms of control are designed to be completely invisible. Psychologist Robert Cialdini spent decades studying what he called the weapons of influence. He discovered that humans have automatic compliance triggers, mental shortcuts that can be exploited without our awareness. We are all just prisoners here, of our own device. Why does this happen? Because your brain processes roughly 11 million bits of information per second, but you're only consciously aware of about 40. That means 9,996% of what influences you happens below your conscious radar. Most of your decisions are made before you even know you made them. This is why manipulation works. Not because you're stupid or weak, but because you're human. Your brain takes shortcuts to survive, and skilled manipulators have learned exactly which shortcuts to exploit. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. The trust trap. The people most likely to manipulate you are the ones you trust most. Not strangers, not obvious villains, the people closest to you. Why? Because manipulation requires access. It requires knowing your vulnerabilities, your fears, your desires. Trust opens the door. A stranger can't gaslight you. They don't know enough about your reality to distort it. But a partner, a parent, a close friend, they have the blueprint to your psyche. Research on coercive control shows that victims often describe their manipulators as charming, attentive, and deeply understanding at first. This is the grooming phase. They study you. They learn what makes you feel special. And then they use that knowledge against you. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Have you ever felt crazy after a conversation with someone you love? Ever questioned your own memory, your own perception, your own sanity? That feeling of confusion is often your first clue that something is wrong. The trust trap works because we lower our defenses around familiar faces. We stop analyzing. We stop questioning. And that's exactly when we become most vulnerable. Speaking of vulnerability, there's a specific emotion manipulators target above all others: guilt as weapon. Guilt is the most powerful manipulation tool ever invented, and chances are someone is using it on you right now. Think about the last time you did something you didn't want to do. Why did you do it? If the answer involves the word should, or feeling bad about yourself, or not wanting to disappoint someone, you experienced guilt manipulation. Your emotions were hacked to control your behavior. The manipulator's playbook is simple. First, establish an expectation you never agreed to. Then, when you don't meet it, act wounded. Make you responsible for their emotional state. Suddenly, you're apologizing for boundaries you had every right to set. Guilt controls your choices. As psychoanalyst Harriet Lerner explained, the difference between guilt and responsibility is that guilt is about control, while responsibility is about care. Here's what manipulators understand that you might not. Guilt bypasses rational thought. When you feel guilty, the logical part of your brain goes offline. You stop asking whether the request is reasonable and start asking how to make the bad feeling stop. Guilt makes you act against your own interests just to feel relief. The solution isn't to become heartless. It's to recognize the difference between genuine responsibility and manufactured obligation. But guilt isn't the only emotional lever they pull. Fear engineering. If guilt doesn't work, there's always fear. And fear is even more powerful because it hijacks your survival instinct. Your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, can trigger a response in 12 milliseconds. That's faster than conscious thought. Manipulators know this. Terror. They learn what you're afraid of: abandonment, rejection, failure, judgment, and they activate those fears to control you. A boss who hints that your job might be at risk. A partner who suggests others are interested in them. A parent who implies their love is conditional. These are fear engineering techniques. They create anxiety so they can offer themselves as the solution. The research on fear-based compliance is disturbing. Studies show that people under chronic threat lose the ability to think strategically. They become reactive. They focus only on immediate relief. People who are afraid are easy to control. This is why abusive relationships are so hard to leave. The victim isn't weak. Their brain has been conditioned to prioritize threat avoidance over logical assessment. Fear kills rational thought, but here's what they don't want you to know. Fear only controls you when you try to escape it. When you learn to sit with fear, to examine it, it loses its power. And that brings us to an even more sophisticated tactic: reality distortion. What if someone could change your perception of reality itself? This isn't science fiction. It's called gaslighting, and it's more common than you think. The term comes from a 1944 film where a husband manipulates his wife into believing she's going insane. He dims the gaslight slightly, and when she notices, he insists nothing has changed. She begins to doubt her own senses. Your reality is not as solid as you believe. Modern gaslighting is subtle. It sounds like that never happened. You're too sensitive. You're remembering it wrong. Everyone agrees with me. Over time, these small denials of your reality compound. You stop trusting your own perceptions. You become dependent on the manipulator to tell you what's real. When you can no longer trust your own mind, you become completely controllable. Research by psychologist Robin Stern reveals that gaslighting victims often describe feeling foggy, confused, or constantly anxious without knowing why. They apologize excessively. They make excuses for their manipulator. The truly scary thing about gaslighting is that it makes you complicit in your own deception. Your memory is the target. The antidote: document everything. Keep records. Trust your gut. Because if something feels wrong, it probably is. Now let's examine how these techniques scale up to entire populations. Mass manipulation. Everything we've discussed so far operates on an individual level, but the same techniques work on millions of people simultaneously. Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, understood this in 1928. He wrote, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society." He wasn't warning us. He was celebrating. Bernays designed campaigns that made women start smoking by associating cigarettes with freedom and rebellion. He helped overthrow governments by manufacturing public consent for corporate interests. Engineered. Today, this is more sophisticated than ever. Your social media feed isn't random. It's curated by algorithms designed to maximize engagement, which means maximizing emotion. Fear, outrage, and anxiety keep you scrolling. The algorithm learns what triggers you and then feeds you more of it. Your feed is designed. Studies show that misinformation spreads 6 times faster than truth on social media, not because people are gullible, but because false content is specifically designed to trigger emotional responses that override critical thinking. You're not consuming information. You're being consumed by it. But perhaps the most disturbing manipulation is the one that happens entirely in your own head. Inner manipulator. Here's the twist you weren't expecting. The most effective manipulator in your life might be yourself. Carl Jung identified what he called the shadow, the parts of yourself you've rejected, denied, and hidden from view. But here's the thing. The shadow doesn't disappear. It manipulates you from the unconscious. Every time you self-sabotage, every time you repeat patterns you swore you'd break, every time you make choices that harm you, that's your inner manipulator at work. Freud called it the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate painful situations from your past. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You are manipulated most by the parts of yourself you refuse to see. This is why insight alone doesn't change behavior. You can understand a pattern intellectually and still act it out, because the inner manipulator operates below rational awareness. It knows your weaknesses better than any external manipulator ever could. Your shadow knows everything. The solution isn't to defeat this part of yourself. It's to integrate it, to bring it into conscious awareness, to understand why it exists and what it needs. This brings us to the question of defense. Defense systems. Now that you understand how manipulation works, how do you protect yourself? The first line of defense is awareness. Manipulators rely on your unconscious responses. When you notice what's happening, their power diminishes significantly. Awareness breaks the spell, but awareness alone isn't enough. You need to strengthen your boundaries. Manipulators probe for weakness. They test your limits to see what they can get away with. Every time you let a boundary slide, you teach them that boundaries are negotiable. A boundary is not a wall. It is a filter that protects what matters. Research on assertiveness shows that people with clear boundaries are significantly less likely to be targeted by manipulators. Not because they are aggressive, but because manipulators prefer easy targets. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves. Here's a practical technique. When you feel pressured, confused, or guilty after an interaction, pause. Don't respond immediately. Say, "I need to think about this." Manipulation thrives on immediate reactions. Time and space are your allies. They allow your rational mind to come back online. But there's one more crucial skill you need to develop. Trust instincts. Your body knows when something is wrong before your mind can articulate it. That uncomfortable feeling in your gut, the tension in your shoulders, the urge to escape a conversation. These are signals from your survival system, and manipulators teach you to ignore them. They override your natural warning systems. Gavin de Becker, a security expert who studied violence prediction, discovered something remarkable. In almost every case of violence, the victim reported having felt something was wrong before the attack, but they dismissed it. They rationalized it away. They were polite instead of safe. Intuition is always right in at least two important ways. It is always in response to something, and it always has your best interest at heart. Your instincts evolved over millions of years to protect you. Start paying attention to your body during interactions. Notice when you feel contracted, anxious, or drained. Notice when you feel expanded, energized, or at ease. Your body never lies. These sensations are data. They're telling you something your conscious mind might be missing. The goal isn't to become paranoid. It's to restore trust in your own perceptions. And that brings us to the most important realization of all: becoming free. Here's the ultimate truth about manipulation. It only works on people who don't know themselves. The more clearly you understand your own values, needs, fears, and desires, the harder you are to manipulate. Liberation. Manipulators exploit uncertainty. They fill the gaps in your self-knowledge with their version of who you should be. But when you've done the work of self-examination, there are no gaps to fill. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." He could have added, "The unexamined life is also easily controlled." Self-knowledge is the ultimate form of psychological immunity. This isn't about becoming cynical or distrustful. It's about becoming so rooted in your own reality that no one can shake you. It's about recognizing manipulation not with paranoia, but with clarity. Know yourself, become unshakable. The journey to freedom starts with a single question. Who am I when no one is trying to influence me? Find that person. Trust that person. And no manipulation will ever own you again. You've now seen behind the curtain. You understand how guilt, fear, and reality distortion are weaponized against you. You know that manipulation operates invisibly, through people you trust, through systems you depend on, and even through your own unconscious mind. But awareness is the beginning of freedom, not the end. This knowledge only matters if you use it. Start noticing, start questioning, start trusting your instincts again. See the invisible strings. The world will keep trying to pull your strings. People will keep testing your boundaries. Your own shadow will keep whispering in your ear. But now you have something you didn't have before. You have the ability to see. And once you see, you can choose. That's the difference between a puppet and a person. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this opened your eyes to something you needed to see, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it.